perfectionist. I'm not as bad as I used to be. And I do mean bad. Like, being a perfectionist is not a positive trait. It's, you know, you ever hear of like analysis paralysis, overthinking everything, overachieving. You don't have to go above and beyond every time. Sometimes good enough is good enough. In fact, most of the time, good enough is good enough. So, he talked it out, and he said that I should really learn to
Alright, put our microphone up. We are live. Okay, cool. We are live. Fantastic. Let's get our chat up on Twitch. Twitch chat. Hell yeah. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Cool. Verify Instagram. Instagram's live. Okay. Turn. Okay. All right. Hey, Mass Death. Hey, Phil Owens. How's it going? Thank you for the haircut compliment. I appreciate that. I'm sorry, guys. I was just getting situated. All right. So tonight on live deck building, upon request and the Discord voted, I'm now doing Eldrazi Tribal for the first time. This is our commander, Ulek, the Fused Atrocity. This thing is a 5-mana commander. We can pay a total of 10 colorless. We can pay 5 mana, 1 of every color. We can pay any amount of weird, complicated stuff, and we can get our commander out. Our commander ourselves is Ulek. It's a 2/5 with Devoid. Devoid means it's colorless. That cares for we care about that for interaction purposes. This thing also says whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay an additional 2 mana, and when you do, you copy all spells you control. Then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. Mana abilities can't be copied. This thing's crazy. This thing is absolutely coconuts. You want to have insane amounts of mana, and you want to be copying your Eldrazi spells in a new Ulek deck. We want to just be running everything that sells Eldrazi. There are plenty of Eldrazi spells, not just permanents. If you guys have a suggestion for our godless Eldrazi deck, please put it in the comments. Do we have anything yet for live deck building? Alright, I am BGM. I do green screen effects and other silly things for Magic the Gathering content all over the internet. We're going to talk about Ulamog. Ulamog is a game-winning card in any form. This thing is a colorless big house. It's had multiple different versions. It looks like this is this is the middle version of Ulamog. This thing is $30. It's a colorless creature. It's a 10/10 with Indestructible that says when you cast a spell, you exile 2 target permanents, and whenever this thing attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. I've been Ulamogged out before. I've seen this thing in the command zone. It's a cool little Voltron commander. It's not really a mill strategy, it's an exile strategy, and that makes it different and fun. I actually don't hate this in the command zone. I don't think it's that bad. The only time I really scoff at Eldrazi's in the command zone is when they have Annihilator. Annihilator is the trigger that I really, really hate. Like this one's not a vibe. Alright. Hey, the real Hi. Thank you for hanging out with me on Twitch, Hi. Hi says the Quicksilver Amulet. Quicksilver Amulet is crazy. Let's talk about it. I think this one's pricey. Nope, this one's cool. This one's only $2. This one's a 4-mana colorless artifact and has an activated ability where we can pay 4 mana and you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is also an Elvish Piper-like effect. This thing's cool. So we're running Eldrazi Tribal. Our commander tonight is Ulek, the Fused Atrocity. And this thing's rad. If we cast Eldrazi spells with Ulek on the battlefield, we can, copy them by paying 2 mana. And because our deck is full of Eldrazi spells are usually big and colorless. We can use this Quicksilver Amulet, and we can cheat them out onto the battlefield if we're having a little trouble with our mana that day. Very cool suggestion. Thank you, Hi. I appreciate it. Alright, what else we got going on over on Twitch? Vash says, do you want just Eldrazi base, or could I share my Slivdrazi stuff? Yeah, dude, Vash, let's get fucking gross about it, man. Let's do Slivdrazi. You want to stuff Ruka Rumel in here to make a Slivdrazi deck work? Let's talk about Ruka Rumel. Ruka Rumel is a 5-mana, 5-color commander, and it forces decks to work with Sliver. Ruka Rumel. Yeah, Ruka Rumel. It's 5 mana, it's in every color, it's a 3/3 human wizard, and as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. And slivers you control and non-token creatures you control are the chosen type. In addition, there are other creature types, and the same is true for creature spells you control that aren't on the battlefield. So stuff in your library is slivers now. Stuff in your graveyard is slivers now, thanks to this lady. This thing can force Sliver Tribal to work. I have a friend in my pod right now who actually runs a Slivdrazi Assassin build because they printed a bunch of Assassin support in the Assassin's Creed expansion that came out a few months ago. So his commander is Ruka Rumel, and it's slivers. It's like a sliver-based deck, and it's got Assassin support and also Eldrazi. And also the Doctors from the Doctor Who deck. The deck is all over the place, but Ruka Rumel makes it work because the slivers all have tribal and like sliver-based effects. Like slivers are creatures that say like all slivers get blah, and most slivers say something like all slivers get or slivers get. All right, if you guys have a suggestion for our commander tonight, Ulalek, please put it in the comments. If you see your comment over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. You can check out the Moxfield deck list on the profile, and if you want to vote on what commanders we talk about during live deck building, y'all can do that by checking out the Discord in the profile as well. So that's Ruka Rumel, and thank you for bringing up Slivdrazi. So tonight's poll for Discord was just decks I hate. So I hate Eldrazi, I hate Sliver. Discord voted, they picked Eldrazi tonight. Slivers was also there, so we suggested Slivdrazi. So we're doing, honestly, whatever y'all want to put in Ulalek, put it in the comments, we'll talk about it. If you were using the tribal Sliver dude, should we use Slivdrazi? Or yeah, Kindred Boone, Paper Gabe over on Twitch. Thank you for hanging out with me over on Twitch, Paper Gabe. Says a Kindred Boone. That sounds like a tribal card. Tribal, when I say tribal, that is like a creature type matters deck. Like you're playing a dragon deck, you're playing a cat deck, you're playing an Eldrazi deck. This thing is Kindred Boone. It's a 4-mana white enchantment, and it enters the battlefield. You choose a creature type. We're going to choose Eldrazi because of our commander Ulalek tonight. And you can pay 2 mana, you put a divinity counter on target creature you control. That is the type. And then each creature you control with the divinity counter on it has indestructible. I like this. This feels fair. This thing is only 50 cents. It feels fair, and it slowly gives your creatures indestructible. So if we break down, I often like to talk about cards in reference to a thing called mana investment. So mana investment is the amount of mana you need to put into a card or a spell to make it do anything. This thing, you gotta pay 4, and then you gotta pay an additional 2 to get the activated ability to put the counter on the thing, and then it has indestructible. So you're gonna pay a total of 6 mana. So you're gonna pay a total of 6 mana to give 1 creature of the chosen type indestructible, and then it'll be 8 mana for 2 creatures, and then 10 mana to do it to 3 creatures and subsequent. But it is value over time, and 2 mana fits really good into the mana curve of a commander game in the late game. This thing probably becomes more impactful in the late game, I imagine. It's interesting. It looks like it was printed in the Caverns of Ixalan precon, the vampire one. Alright, a Jolly Balloon Man. The Real Hi says the Jolly Balloon Man. Let's get real silly about it. The Jolly Balloon Man is rad. I quite enjoy the Jolly Balloon Man. I use the Jolly Balloon Man as like a fast food employee in my green screen videos. He works at like the Planeswalker McDonald's in my silly MTG green screen videos. This is the Jolly Balloon Man. He is a 2-mana Boros, 3-mana Boros creature from Duskmourn. He's a 1/4 with haste. He has an activated ability where we can pay 1 mana, and then we make a token of a thing. It's a 1/1 flying creature with haste, and we sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah, and we only activate this guy as a sorcery. He's cool. The Jolly Balloon Man makes complex tokens of creatures, gives them haste, and it makes them a little 1/1. And then we can do the thing with the creature. He's a fun way to make copies of your commander. If you don't care about your commander dying to the legend rule, if your commander has a death trigger or an ETB trigger, it's super silly to make little balloon copies of your commander. I like him. He's cool. He's a vibe. He's also a budget card at 60 cents, which also I really enjoy. I got 2 copies of him when Dustmore came out. He's a fun guy. Alright, so then we got a Kindred Discovery. Kindred Discovery is rad. It's cool. It's a tribal card. It's like the tribal card in blue. It's a $9 5-mana mono blue enchantment. And it says that whenever a creature enters or attacks of the chosen type, and you choose a type when it enters, you get to draw yourself a card off your little enchantment that costs $9. It's cool. It's cool in tribal decks, but like, I don't know. I've played it. I played it in a Merfolk deck, and I guess my Merfolk build wasn't very good because it didn't feel that impactful to me, personally. But I don't know, if you have a bunch of little guys, this thing could be cool. Could be a vibe. Something else I really enjoy about the Kindred Discovery card is that there's a ton of different arts for this thing. They reprinted it in the Wildsville Drain set about a year and a half ago. Yeah, it's cool. It's a vibe. Alright. And then we got a Clone Legion. So what the hell is a Clone Legion? Clone Legion sounds like something that's going to come out with the Star Wars expansion. Alright, so this thing's $3, it's mono blue, it's 9 mana, and I'm already nervous. It says for each creature target player controls, you create a token that's a copy of that creature. I love it, actually. This thing is a vibe. So you really gotta earn this spell, right? You gotta earn it. It is 9 mana in blue. That's a lot of mana. I imagine this thing is very fun in a Simic deck. That's the green pairing of blue, so we can get a bunch of ramp to hopefully eventually cast this thing. I bet in most Commander games that I play, you can often just die before you hit 9 mana. But you know what? This is really silly. Because this is like, you cast this when you're losing, and then you might suddenly be winning. I feel like it makes big gameplay moments, and that's fun for me. Also, if your opponents just are always running creature decks, it could be a vibe. If you find a way to cast it for free, even better. You know what? I'm talking myself into it. I actually really like this card. What the hell is this thing from? I don't know what... I want to say that's a commander set symbol, but I'm not positive. Clone Legion. Who suggested the Clone Legion? Vash! Excellent suggestion, Vash, over on Twitch. I appreciate it. Ooh, Zombie Kidney over on Twitch. Suggested in Oblivion Sower. Oblivion Sower, that's a zombie card. I'm gonna groan about so many of these Eldrazi cards. So the theme of the Discord poll was decks I don't like playing against, and Eldrazi was on that list. So we're talking about Eldrazi tonight because it's the one the Discord channel voted for. This thing is $1. It's 6 mana, and it says when you cast a spell, target opponent exiles the top pair of cards of each of their libraries. Target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library. Then you may pay any number, or you may put any number of land cards that player owns from exile into the battlefield under your control. Okay, cool. So this thing exiles a bunch of cards from the top, and then you get to get ramp off your opponent. I like that. And it is a cast trigger, so you get to 6 mana, you get this 5/6. This thing is an Eldrazi spell, so we could use our Ululek trigger, we can pay 2 colorless mana, and we can get a copy of this thing, and then we could be ramping even harder. So for a total of 8 mana in our Ululek deck, we mill about 8 cards of our opponents, except it's even better than mill because they're not going to the graveyard, they're exiled, and we slam all the lands that we hit off the trigger onto the battlefield. This thing's just actually a 6 mana ramp spell stapled to a creature. Cons about the card. I don't know. I've done this. I've done this. I always give them back their stuff. But sometimes when I steal lands, it's easier to forget about a land than a creature. And sometimes I'll find my friend's land in my deck. Sometimes. I play an effect similar to this in green where you can do it. I think it's on like an ETB creature. But anyway, that's the only con I have about this thing. This thing's nice. It's $1. It's an Eldrazi spell. If we pay 2 mana with our commander's trigger, we can ramp twice. So Duffle503 over on TikTok suggests a Mirror Smith. Mirror Smith? What the heck is the Mirror Smith? Okay. I wasn't expecting the Mirror Smith to be a mono white 2-mana human artificer lady 2/1. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1. If you do, you create a little mirror creature token. This thing's a vibe. I like it. I like white creature cards that make tokens. White tokens is one of my favorite deck types. This thing makes tokens when you cast artifacts on the trigger if you pay 1. I imagine we're going to have a bunch of artifacts, probably, because we're in Eldrazi, we're in a Devoid strategy, we usually care about colorless spells. Most of our creatures, in fact, probably all of our creatures, are going to be colorless creatures. This thing makes colorless creatures. The mirror aren't Eldrazi's, they're artifacts, which is a little bit of a non-bow, but, it's a vibe, y'all. And also, maybe in, like, an Anim Pakal deck, this thing could be really cool. I bet in, like, the Esper artifact creature Urza deck, that thing's also a house. Diabolic Turtles suggests, oh, what about a Blight Herder? Blight Herder. What the hell is a Blight Herder? Blight Herder is not a card I'm familiar with. Oh, no. Oh, that is sick. Okay, alright, so I poo-poo Eldrazi playstyles, but the art is such a vibe. This is a Blight Herder. It's a 5-mana colorless spell. It looks like it's from Zendikar. It's a 4/5, and when you cast your Blight Herder, you may put 2 cards your opponents own from exile into their owner's graveyards, and if you do, you make 3 1/1 scions that can be sacrificed for mana at instant speed. Very cool. It's aggressively costed at 5. Most Eldrazi spells that come to mind when I think of Eldrazi spells are a lot more than 5 mana. This thing is aggressively costed. It's the same cost as our commander. I like it. And also we can make a bunch of scions, and we can sack those scions for mana, or we can do other things with them. It's also a trigger, which kind of cares about our commander's trigger as well. The one thing I don't like about Ululek is its trigger. It's a little complicated. It's a little wordy. Let's give it a reread for anyone who's rejoined us. Okay, so this is Ululek the Fused Atrocity. Our commander tonight is a legendary 5-mana 2/5 Eldrazi with Devoid, and whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you can pay 2 mana, and if you do, you copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and target abilities you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. Okay, so something else I think would be super duper spicy in an Ululek deck in particular, because Ululek, this whole word block right here behind my hand, that's all one trigger. And if we can find a way to give our spells haste, we could cast our spells. Okay, so if we can find a way to give our spells haste in an Ululek deck, we could have the absolute craziest turns and just pop off, because if we cast our spells in response to our triggers, if we can somehow do that at instant speed, we activate Ululek, we copy the triggers too. So we'll be getting double spells, double triggers. That's why I think giving stuff flash in this Ululek deck is the way to really make it pop off and synergize crazy hard. Alright, so we got suggested at Cloudstone Curio. It's a 3-mana colorless artifact for $10. It says, whenever a non-artifact permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. Okay, cool. So normally when I see a Cloudstone Curio, it's usually a combo piece. They're usually doing something kind of poopy, and I'm not a big fan. I'm not typically a combo player. I'm more of a casual commander person. But this thing's very cool. You can use its trigger to kind of infinitely bounce something back to your hand and then find a way to play it for free. And then you can get infinite triggers and pop off in crazy ways. That's usually what I think of when I think of a Cloudstone Curio. I think of it as a gateway to infinite mana and also just winning the game. Thank you, John Reynolds, for the suggestion. Doctor Who's Your Daddy suggests a Myco Synth Lattice. Myco Synth Lattice. Myco Synth Lattice makes me sad, and I'm going to tell you guys why in a minute. So, Myco Synth Lattice makes everything art colorless. Echoes of Eternity makes colorless stuff. Yeah, we haven't talked about Echoes of Eternity yet. We'll talk about Echoes of Eternity after this. Thank you very much, Doctor Who's Your Daddy. So this is Myco Synth Lattice. It's a 6-mana colorless artifact, and all permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types, and all cards that aren't in play, i.e. cards in your graveyard, cards in exile, and cards in hand, Graveyard's Hand. Yeah, they're all artifacts too. And players may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. So it makes everything colorless, turns stuff into artifacts, and players may spend mana of any color. So in a way, that last line's kind of nice. But by the time that this thing enters the battlefield, everyone probably should have fixed their mana by now. This thing feels like a gateway. So normally when I see this thing, they do this so they can, one, either take control of everything on the battlefield, including your lands, destroy everything on the battlefield, including your lands. This thing usually means a really bad time, in my experience. This thing has only made me question why I play Magic in the hands of my friends. Alright, I want to make a dragon deck based around Tiamat. That's cool. If you want to see, Joe Bird, if you want to check out the Moxfield page, we've built 5-color dragons a couple times. If you want to see what the internet or the TikTok community would put in a 5-color dragon deck, you can check those out. That's in the link tree on the Moxfield page. And then we got Delnay Streetwise Lookout. Delnay Streetwise Lookout is cool. It's a mono white card. It was printed in the Murderous Karlov Manor expansion. It's 3 mana, and it makes little things trigger twice. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that triggered ability triggers an additional time. It also says creatures you control power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. This card loves little guys. He is, or Delnay, is 43 bucks. It's a 2/2. It makes your little guys trigger twice, and it says they can't be blocked by big guys. I imagine we could build this deck in such a way where we just have a ton of Scions and Spawn, little Eldrazi creatures, and we can use this thing to make them pop off twice when we sacrifice them. I like that a lot. Wait, no. Sacrificing is an activated ability. I don't know. Delnay is super popular, though. A cryo note says a great deck for Skittering Cicada. Skittering Cicada. And an Urza Battles. Okay, Urza's Battlethopter gives everything flash. And then we can see a Skittering Cicada also has flash. And you may cast colorless spells as though they had flash. 10 out of 10. That's probably why this thing is $8. And whenever you cast a colorless spell until end of turn, until end of turn, the Cicada gains trample and gets +X/+X, where X is that spell's mana value. This thing's amazing. So, like we were saying earlier, a lot of Eldrazi have really high CMCs and high mana values. If you look over here in the cost, that's the mana value if you convert the number. So this thing, if we cast like a 9-drop, like a Void Winnower, or if we cast like an 11-drop Titan, this thing is a threat, and it gives itself trample, which is crazy. This thing kind of just becomes bigger than the thing we're casting in the first place. This guy's a vibe. I like this thing a lot. Also, the art's really good. Homebrew Himbo. Cool name, Homebrew Himbo. I feel like Roaming Throne, Ishin, 2 Heavens is 1, and Marvin Murderous Mimic would work. So we're gonna do... Yeah, we're gonna do Ishin, 2 Heavens is 1, and I'm just gonna talk. So Roaming Throne, I'm pretty sure you guys have all seen Roaming Throne. Roaming Throne has been seen all over Commander, and it is great. It is great in any deck that has triggered abilities on the Commander. Ishin, because it causes the triggered abilities to trigger twice, it enters, you choose a creature type, and those triggers trigger twice. Ishin, 2 Heavens is 1 is my personal favorite among those lists, even though he is a little hard for me to spell. Let's try 2 Heavens is 1. He causes attack triggers to trigger twice. That's what Ishin does. So Ishin says that whenever a creature you control attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent to trigger, it triggers an additional time. He's cool. These effects that care about triggered abilities, they're what's known as Harmonicon effects, named after the card Panharmonicon. Panharmonicon is a card that was triggered in Kaladesh that causes ETB triggers to trigger additional times on certain kinds of permanents. And so, like, we have Roaming Throne, which is like a tribal Harmonicon, and then we saw Ishin, who's an attack Harmonicon. And what was your other suggestion, Homebrew Himbo? Marvin Murderous... Okay, so Marvin Murderous Mimic is not a Homeronicon. He's just a rad little artifact creatures that came out of Duskmourn. Marvin Murderous Mimic is a 2-mana toy creature. He's colorless, and he has all activated abilities of creatures you control. Which is cool, because if your commander has an activated ability, Marvin can just do your commander's ability again. And if your whole entire commander deck is built around you activating your commander, Marvin is excellent, because he can just be like a copy of your commander with a different name. He's great. He himself is legendary, so you can't really make copies of him either without an additional effect to protect the tokens. He's a good vibe. He's only $3 right now. I'm glad that Marvin's staying cheap. I like Marvin a lot. I bought a single of Marvin just to make sure I had access to him. I run him in my Rona deck, which is a looting deck built around tapping to draw a card and discard a card. So Golden Archer says a Reality Smasher. Reality Smasher. Hey everybody, thank you for hanging out with me. I do live deck building. I am BGM, or Bigger, Gayer Magic. And on live deck building, we talk about a commander. Our commander tonight is Ululek. And then we talk about what you guys would put in the commander deck. Tonight we're building Eldrazi. We did a Discord poll based on all the deck types I hate, and Eldrazi was the one I hate that people liked the most. So we're doing Eldrazi Tribal tonight. If you want to vote on the Discord, that's where you can vote. This is a Reality Smasher. It's a 5-mana Eldrazi spell, which goes great in our Ululek deck, because when we cast this Eldrazi spell, we might be able to get a trigger on our commander and double it on up. So this thing is a 5/5 that says whenever Reality Smasher becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, counter that spell unless its controller discards a card. Okay, so this is kind of mean. This can force some discard effects. So it's kind of like a ward. It's kind of like ward, discard a card, or counter the ability. It's kind of like ward, discard a card. This is just ward, discard a card. Yeah, that's ward discarded. On Twitch, we see a Horizon Stone by Paper Game. Horizon Stone. Horizon Stone is the card that combos with Cloudstone, right? Horizon Stone. Yeah. So Horizon Stone, yep, this looks like... God, I am not a big fan of infinite combos. Okay, so this here Horizon Stone is a 5-mana artifact, and if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead, and you keep it throughout steps and phases. This thing's crazy. This thing's kind of like a little green Omnath on a 5-drop artifact. The art's kind of a vibe. It enables you to have stupid amounts of mana. It's got some cool flavor text, and if you want to check that out on the deck list. Kona Rescue Beastie. So Vash the Stampede over on Twitch suggests a Kona Rescue Beastie. Kona Rescue Beastie is kind of like an Elvish Piper, but it does it in a second main phase trigger. Oh, that makes my throat feel much better. So, Moxfield just updated. So if you have some issues with Moxfield, the website just got an update. This is Kona Rescue Beastie. It's a green $3 card from Duskmourn. It's a legendary Beast Survivor, and it has Survival, which triggers at the beginning of your second main phase. If Kona's tapped, you get to slam a creature from your hand onto the battlefield for free. This is a super relevant effect in an Eldrazi deck, because most of the Eldrazi are known for being big, beefy boys with like over 10 mana cost in their spell. So this thing is a cool way that we can slam our Ulamongs, our Kozileks, and our Emmerkruls onto the battlefield with this here Kona Rescue Beastie. Thank you very much for the follow, Kit Kermit69 on TikTok. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I am BGM. I use green screen effects to make silly little Magic the Gathering content all over the internet. And on live, we do live deck building. If you want to put a card in our Ululek Eldrazi Tribal deck, please put it in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. And you guys can see the cards that people suggested on that deck list, which is linked in my link tree. Filigree Sages. Filigree Sages. F-I-L-G-R-E-E. Sages. Filigree Sages. Filigree Sages. Okay, I already hate it. It's an artifact and it's blue. It's the worst. It's 40 cents. It's a 4-drop that says 3 mana, untap target artifact. This feels like it's part of a combo. This feels like it's part of an infinite mana combo. I don't know the combos. I'm not personally a combo person. But on live deck building, it's not really about me. It's about what you guys want to put in the comments. That determines what we talk about. Lowell says a Morophon the Boundless. So Morophon's rad. He enables creature type builds in all 5 colors. Morophon, is it Morophon or is it Morophon? Yes, Morophon the Boundless. This thing is printed in Commander Masters, and it's $6. It's a 7-drop colorless shapeshifter creature with changeling, meaning that it is every creature type, and as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. We're probably going to pick Eldrazi for Ululek. And spells you choose of the chosen type costs Wooburg less. Wooburg is a term in MTG that means all 5 of the colors, and this effect reduces only the amount of colored mana you pay. Other creatures you control that are Eldrazi get +1/+1. This thing's cool. This thing was kind of like the Ruka Rumel commander before we had Ruka Rumel. It's cool. You could force Slivdrazi Tribal with Morophon. You can also do it with Ruka Rumel. Ruka Rumel kind of replaced it. Duffel503 says a Nightshade Dryad. Nightshade Dryad is not a card I am familiar with. Nightshade Dryad. Okay, we got a little 2-drop from MH3. It's a Death Touching 1/2 that taps for colorless or 1 mana of any color. Okay, so something notable about MTG in rules. I'm not a judge. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt. But the reason that this thing can tap for 1 mana of any color and colorless is because the effect that lets you tap 1 mana of any color can't tap for colorless. I know it seems a little asinine, but colorless is its own thing. Something kind of that I do enjoy about this card is it is a death touching blocker if we need it to be. Sometimes just having the death touching creature means that your opponents attack somebody else in a commander game, and this guy can do that, and he can also make 1 mana of any color and colorless. He's also a common, he's 40 cents, and he's kind of hot. I vibe. He came out in Modern Horizons 3 in 2024. Jonathan Holmes says, ooh, like, fucking with Echoes of Eternity. Oh, Echoes of Eternity. Echoes of Eternity is a rad card that came out in the same set as Ululek. But it didn't come out in the Eldrazi precon, so it was the Chase Eldrazi card from MH3 to put in the precon. This thing is 6 mana, it's an Eldrazi spell, it's $3 for the fancy art, and it says if a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. Excuse me, it's not a sorcery, it's an enchantment. My bad, y'all. It is a rad enchantment, though. It's 6 mana, and it's kind of like Eldrazi Harmonicon. It's great. It also works for colorless stuff, so it's also kind of like a chase in in Artifact Storm decks. It's a good time. I like it. It's a vibe. I like that the fancy art is only $3. All right. Lexus ACH says a Moon Silver Key. Moon Silver Key is a vibe. I think it's a rock, right? Like it taps for mana. Moon Silver Key is a 2-mana rock. No, not a rock. It doesn't tap for mana. You pay 1 mana and you sacrifice the Moon Silver Key. You search your library for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic, and you reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. I love this. I love this, actually. There's a deck type called Artifactocrats, which is like an Aristocrats, but artifacts instead of creatures strategy. This is an excellent card. Also, in an Artifact Storm deck, they also love this card there. It finds basics in Joyra. Joyra is like the premier Artifact Storm commander, and this thing is Joyra fuel. It's great. It fixes you. It can get you artifacts if you want to be that kind of person, or it can get you basic if you want to be wholesome. I like it a lot. I also like that it's $1.50, and also the art is quite a vibe. All right. Void, hey! Good to see you, Void, over on Twitch. You suggest a Sire of Stagnation. Let's pull up the Sire of Stagnation. Hey everybody, I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and MCG content creator all over the internet, and if you would like to help support me, we have just started getting our affiliate promotion done on Twitch. So if you'd like to help me monetize my content, you could jump on over to Twitch, hit follow, and maybe head back over to TikTok in case anything happens to it. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. This is a Sire of Stagnation. It's a Dimir 6-drop, and it's a 5/7 that's devoid, meaning it's colorless. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library, and you draw 2 cards. 10 out of 10, would play, would recommend. This thing is only 6 mana. It's kind of like, what's that card that lets us draw a ton of cards? Consecrated Sphinx. It's kind of like an Eldrazi Consecrated Sphinx. And it's also on a land trigger, y'all. It's a land trigger. So that you can, almost every turn, if your opponents are having a good game and they're hitting their land drops, you're gonna draw 2 cards off this thing. You're gonna exile 2 cards off the top. That's not significant. I don't think the top 2 cards is significant in a commander game, but this thing lets you draw 2 cards off your opponent's landfall triggers. This thing is amazing. Wait, can we hit multiple landfall triggers? Can we hit multiple whenever a land is... Okay, if your opponent plays multiple lands, you're drawing oodles and boodles of cards off this thing. This thing is amazing. Actually, this thing is playable outside of Eldrazi decks, I feel. It's only $1.50. It's $1.50. It's a 6-drop. So the card I'm comparing this to is a real expensive card, and people really love it in Commander. It's called Consecrated Sphinx. Consecrated Sphinx is the mono blue version of this, right? Consecrated... God damn it. Okay, so we gotta look... Alright, this is the Secret Lair version, bear with me. But this card says whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. It's 6 mana, it's in mono blue, and most versions of the Consecrated Sphinx hang out around $20 or more. So we're comparing the Sire of Stagnation to Consecrated Sphinx. Stagnation. I really like this thing. This thing's amazing. Okay, so this thing's $1.50. Instead of like 20, it's in Dimir colors, so you're a little more color restricted. You gotta be in black as well. But this thing has the trigger based on a landfall trigger for your opponents. And your opponents aren't gonna not play lands, probably, and you're gonna draw 2 cards off each trigger, and if they play multiple lands, you're gonna draw 2 cards then. I don't really care about the exiling top cards of their library. This card's amazing. I love it. I might have to buy me one of these for $1.50. This is a good little Eldrazi. Who suggested that? Void. Of course Void suggested that. Void, excellent suggestion, as always. Thank you for hanging out with me. Alright, Duffel says a campus renovation. Campus renovation is, I think, in Boros colors? I think it's in Boros colors. I think it came out in, like, Aftermath. Yeah, it's in Boros colors. It's a 5-mana Boros sorcery from Aftermath. It's an uncommon, and it's 40 cents. And it says you return up to 1 target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until end of turn, until end of your next turn, you can play those cards. So this thing is kind of like Recursion, but bad. It's like Recursion, but bad for me. So whenever one or more times, turn up to 2 artifacts or enchantments from your graveyard, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you get them. So it's kind of like Card Advantage. It's like Card Advantage, except you can recur some artifacts or enchantments from your graveyard. I don't know. It's cool. So in regards to recursion effects and cards that can help me play stuff out of my graveyard, the first thing I don't reach for in regards to filling that kind of effect in my deck is like Boros. Typically, I lean towards green or black for that, especially when we have access to all 5 colors. So, like, the premier, like, recursive effect is an Eternal Witness. The Eternal Witness is a mono green elf card. It's like 3 mana, and it enters the battlefield, and you take a card from your graveyard, and you put it in your hand. Eternal Witness has had a ton of arts. This is a fancy art from the 30th anniversary. It came out a few years ago during the 30th anniversary. And that's, yeah, so I would run this over that. Unless I was in like a Boros enchantment artifact theme specifically. Urza. Which Urza? Urza Cave. Urza. So Urza lands are crazy. Let's talk about Urza's land. Urza's Cave. Urza Cave. Hopefully it comes up for Urza Cave. Yeah, Urza's Cave and his mine and his plantation or whatever the hell he has. They're a bunch of colorless lands, and they tap for proportionally more mana the more of Urza's real estate you possess. They're colorless lands. They enter untapped, and they tap for colorless. Urza's is a land type. We recently had a land types matter precon come out in Modern Horizons 3. It was in blue and green Simic colors. This thing got the Urza's set of lands got reprinted in Modern Horizons 3 for that precon. It's cool. It's $4. And I think when you assemble all of Urza's real estate, I think it taps for 12 mana. I don't know. I've never played with Urza's portfolio before. Golos. Yeah, is... Okay, so the thing about Moxfield, y'all, and if y'all want to check out the deck list, it's on Moxfield. The link's in the profile. So the thing about Golos and when building Commander decks on Moxfield, if the card is banned in Commander, it's not going to come up. Unfortunately, I believe that Golos, the Tireless Pilgrim, is still banned in Commander. Mass Hysteria. Mass Hysteria. We got a suggested from Void over on Twitch. If Mass Hysteria. Hey everybody, if you want to help support me, if you want to help me make a little bit of money of my content, if you could please head on over to Twitch, hit follow, and then come on back over to TikTok. Mass Hysteria. The link is in the profile on the link tree. Why is Mass Hysteria? It's because I'm not spelling hysteria correctly. It's because I'm chilling too hard. Alright, so Mass Hysteria is a 1-mana mono red enchantment, and it's fair and balanced because it says that all creatures, includes your opponent's creatures, they all got haste, which means they can attack on the turn they enter, which means that your games are a lot faster. I like this card. I like this card because it's $3. I like that it gets your opponents involved, and I like that it kind of gives them a little bit of It gives them goodwill to you, towards you, because their creatures can do things faster because you're a bro. And that's why I like this card. I'm a casual Commander player. I'm not a CDH person. That's not where I have, like, joy. So I like this card. I would run this. I would run this in a red deck. Also, it's in a haste is a game-winning word in and of itself. And if you're in a really creature-heavy build, haste is a game-ending keyword, and this gives it to all your creatures. It does it at a really aggressive mana cost of 1. That's hella fast. It also gives it to your opponents. I love it. I love it. I also love that it's $3. It's a really affordable way to give board-wide haste to your entire board. And also, I think it makes your Commander games more interesting because it involves your opponents. Thank you for the suggestion of Mass Hysteria, Void. Okay, Dark Ronin over on Twitch says an Eldritch Immunity. Eldritch Immunity. Eldritch Immunity is not something I'm familiar with. Okay, this thing also came out in Modern Horizons 3. It's a 1-mana Eldrazi instant. So the thing about the wording of our commander, let's take a little peek at Ulalek over here. It says whenever we cast ourselves an Eldrazi spell, we can pay 2 mana and we can double up that spell. And if we have triggers on the stack with that spell, we copy those too. So this thing, being an Eldrazi instant, will trigger our commander, which is very exciting for us. We can cast this thing on top of a creature spell, then activate Ulalek, copy the creature spell, and all of our Eldrazi nonsense on the stack. This thing says a target creature you control gains protection from each color until end of turn. You can also overload it for 5 mana. Overload means that you change the word each in the text box. You change the word target to each. So this thing, if you cast it for 5 mana, gives your entire board protection, which is very great in a commander game. You're in Eldrazi. Nobody wants to... Okay, at least I don't want to be put against an Eldrazi player. If you guys want to vote on what commander deck we're doing in future live deck building, head on over to the Discord. We're building Eldrazi because the theme of the poll tonight was deck types I hate. I'm not a big fan of the Eldrazi. The Eldrazi draw a lot of interaction, as they should. This thing is a little instant that we can cast for 5 mana to give our board protection. I find that really silly and fun. It's also $5, and it's also in the Eldrazi precon that came out with Modern Horizons 3. Sage Slay says all is dust. Oh my god, all is dust. All is dust. All of Dust is the Eldrazi board wipe. the colorless artifact build board wipe. All of Dust is crazy, and it's worded in a way that's highly effective. This is a 7-mana Eldrazi sorcery. It's an Eldrazi spell, which means we can copy it with Ululek. And it says that each player sacrifices all colored permanents they control. So the way that this is worded, it gets around indestructible, it gets around targeting, it gets around everything. Because the verb on this card is sacrifices. Sacrificing means that you are taking a creature from the battlefield and placing it into the graveyard. So sacrificing gets around indestructible, it gets around hexproof shroud, all that nonsense. And this thing is just a really punishing board wipe. And it's just something you have to expect. If you're playing against an Eldrazi deck, they have this, they have it in their hand, and they're gonna hurt your feelings with it. It is the Eldrazi board wipe, and it's always one-sided, because most of the Eldrazi either have Devoid, if they are colored spells, or they're like 13 mana, and they have Annihilator, which is just a keyword that makes me very sad. Yeah, it is the Eldrazi board wipe, and it hurts every single time. So Duffel says a Rhythm of the Wild. Rhythm of the Wild. Rhythm of the Wild is... Excuse me. Well, I'll say it's green. Oh, no. Yeah, it's Gruul. This card's amazing. We've seen this card every live we did this week. This card's amazing. It's $5, and it does work. It says that your creature spells can't be countered, and it also says that non-token creatures you control have Riot. Riot is an ETB trigger that we can either put a +1/+1 counter on the creature when it enters, making it a little bigger and a little spicier, or we can give it Haste. Haste is the game-ending keyword that says you don't have to wait for your creature to see an untapped step to attack with it. This thing's great. It's great in Gruul decks. We talked about it every day this week. Y'all don't need me to tell you it's great. Great suggestion. If you guys want to see any of the cards we pulled up over here, check out the Moxfield link in the profile. If you guys want to vote on the decks that we do during live deck building, head to the Discord. We are going to talk about an Expedition map. Expedition map is like a colorless artifact. It's 1 mana with an activated ability. You pay 2, you tippity tap Expedition map, and you say that you sacrifice this artifact, search your library for a land card. Any land. A land card. It could be any land you want. It could be Ancient Tomb. It could be a bounce land. It could be a Temple of the False God. It could be a Nykthos. It could be a land, the land of your dreams. You reveal it, you put it into your hand, and then shuffle. This thing's amazing, especially in Artifact-ocrat style. This thing sacrifices itself. It can get your Nykthos. It can get your Gates. This thing's wonderful. 10 out of 10 would play. It's also a common, but it's like $1.50 common, if that tells you anything. It is wild for a common to be over $1. This thing is, and it's also in the newest set. This thing's great, y'all. Excuse me. Lexus 8... Lexac. Is it Luxac? I'm sorry I'm butchering your name, Lexac. You say a Chamil, the Inner Sun. Let's talk about a Chamil. The Inner Sun. This thing's 6 mana. It's colorless. It's a legendary. It came out in the Caverns of Ixalan expansion last year, and it gives you an it gives you an end step trigger that you discover 5. Discover 5 means that you exile cards off the top of your library, and until you hit a spell of mana value 5 or less, you can cast that spell. But if you don't want to cast that spell, you can choose to put that thing into your hand, and then you shuffle the rest, put them on the bottom of your library. Cascade is in effect a lot like Discover, except worse, because you either have to cast the spell or it gets exiled. Bummer. This thing's great. It also says that your spells can't be countered. I don't know what kind of playgroups y'all have. My playgroups aren't super counter heavy, because I'm a casual person. But this thing's cool. This thing is $23. It's a meaningful artifact. It prevents stuff from being countered, which can be really useful in CEDH, or if you're in a really counter heavy situation. If you are, don't, maybe. It's cool. It's a vibe. A little pricey. I'd recommend a proxy. Sage Slay says a Twinning Staff over on Twitch. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on Twitch, Sage Slay. The Twining Staff on top of that would be nuts. Twinning Staff. What the hell is a Twinning Staff? You pay 3 mana, and if... I'm sorry, you pay 3 mana, you get this artifact. This artifact's $9, so it's probably real good. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times, plus an additional time, and you may choose new targets for the additional copy. You can also pay 7 mana and copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So the thing about this is that our commander over here, our commander tonight, Ulalek can copy spells of Eldrazi when we cast them. If we pay 2 mana into Ulalek, we can copy that spell. Twinning Staff cares about us copying spells, because if you would copy a spell 1 or more times, you get an additional copy. This thing will make our Eldrazi build absolutely pop off and explode. Great suggestion. Thank you, Sage Slay, over on Twitch. If y'all would like to help me monetize my content, hop on over to Twitch, hit follow, and then come right back on over to Twitch TikTok before it gets banned again. Alright, and then we see a Void... Oh my gosh, Void Winnower. Void Winnower is a card that makes me so sad. It's $33, it's 9 mana, it's colorless, and because it's colorless, you can put it in any deck you want to. This thing is an 11/9 Eldrazi that says your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs. I keep getting hosed by Void Winnower because I have never ever once built a deck caring about if a thing was odd or even before. I never planned for it, and it hurts my feelings every time we see the Void Winnower. It also says your opponents can't block with creatures with even converted mana costs. But you know what the most infuriating thing about Void Winnower is to me? It's one-sided. It's a one-sided stacks piece. And that's probably why it's $33. This thing is crazy, and it says, and suddenly it can say that you have no spells in your hand. It can say that you can't really play the game anymore. It says you lose. It says you lose. And it says it to me almost every time it hits the battlefield. It is $33, so if you want to upset your friend for less than $1, instead of $33, get a proxy of Void Winnower at printingproxies.com and watch your friends groan. Oh, right. I always target a player that plays... You know, honestly, I hate Eldrazi too. I also hate... Okay, so a Voidless Void says a Null Energy Blast. The Null Energy Blast is a vibe. This thing also came out in the Modern Horizons 3 set. And it says... Uh-oh. Null Energy Blast. Null N-U-L-L-E-N-E-R-G. Null Energy Blast. I'm sorry, dude. It's not Null Energy Blast. Can I please get a spell check on that Eldrazi instant counter spell, please? Spreading Plague of Starchy. Starchy! Thank you for heading on over to Twitch to help me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Spreading Plague is my meanest card in your Ulalek deck. Oh, you one of them Ulalek players, Old Sparky? Let's talk about Spreading Plague. Spreading Plague is actually not a card I'm familiar about. Spreading Plague, it's 5 mana, it's black, it's an enchantment, it's $11, and whenever a creature comes into play, destroy all other creatures that share a color with it. They can't be regenerated. This is absolutely 100% diabolical. So we saw that little dork about 20 minutes ago. If you were in the live about 20 minutes ago, we saw a dork, and it had an activate ability that said it could pay, you tap it, you get a mana of any color. And then it had a second ability that said, tap, get a colorless mana. Because colorless mana is not colored mana, and colorless creatures are colorless. They do not have a color. And this thing only hurts your opponents, and it doesn't hurt yours. Because the keyword devoid, we have it on our commander, it has reminder text. It says, oh, what does the reminder text say? This card has no color. It will not be hurt by this thing. So our Devoid and our colorless Eldrazi's won't be hurt by this thing. It is absolutely disgusting. Who put that in? Old Starchy, great suggestion. It is so synergistic to a frustrating degree. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for jumping on over to Twitch for me. I appreciate it. If you would like to help me out, you can jump on Twitch, hit follow, head right back on over to TikTok. Clout Machine says, Void Winnower doesn't work well with this. How do I see the deck you make again? Fatal Slur, thank you for asking. If you would like to see all the suggestions we talked about tonight, use the link tree to head on over to the Moxfield page. And yeah, you can check it out. We got a dated deck list. I think it's called Eldrazi Tribal tonight. If you want to vote on the decks, we can say Guildless Commons is our next suggestion. If you want to vote on what decks we talk about during live deck techs, head on over to the Discord. That's also in the link tree. Guildless Commons. Yeah, so the theme of tonight's poll were the 3 deck types I really hate. And there were Shrines, Slivers, and Eldrazi. And the Discord voted for Eldrazi, so we're building Eldrazi. This is a Guildless Commons. It's a colorless lands, and it's $2.50. And when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped, and when it enters, return a land you control to its owner's hand. So things of this effect: lands that enter the battlefield tapped, return a land to our hands, and tap for colorless are what's known as bounce lands in the Magic the Gathering community. Bounce lands because they bounce a land already on the battlefield to our hands. Bounce land. I like bounce lands, and there are certain deck styles that can really abuse a bounce land. If you want to have lands in your hand instead of on the battlefield, like maybe in a Borborygmos deck, this is very exciting. I like that there. Also, if you care about lands entering the battlefield and you want to play multiple of them from your hands, you can play bounce lands, put them in your hand, and then you can keep playing lands from your hands. I like bounce lands. They're often regarded as bad because they enter tapped. And often the adage in MTG is untapped obviously takes priority over everything else because it's faster and it helps you win faster, helps you combo off faster. That is personally not my vibe, though. We're looking for a Volrath the Shape Stealer. Yeah, Volrath the Shape Stealer is a 5 mana, $2/5 legendary shapeshifter with an, at the beginning of combat trigger on your turn, you put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and then that kind of turns on his activated ability, where you pay 4 mana and you say, until end of turn, our commander, Volrath, the Shape Stealer, becomes a copy of target creature with a counter on it, except it's a 7/5. With the ability to change again at instant speed. At instant speed. At instant speed really is the spice of Volrath. I imagine that Volrath could be a very fun commander. Like you pack him with abilities to put counters on your opponent's creatures, and then you run a few spicy creatures yourself to turn him into, and then you just play your opponent's decks. I feel like he could be a vibe. You make a few copies of him, and then you can play multiple of your opponent's creatures. That could be a really fun deck. Null Elemental Blast. That's the... Thank you, Void. Null Elemental Blast is the card we're looking for. So this is an Eldrazi. No, it's not an Eldrazi. It's just a colorless... It's a colorless counterspell. This thing is 1 mana, and you can counter target multicolored spell, or you can destroy target multicolored permanent. This thing's great, y'all. This thing is so good. Most Commander decks, when I sit down to play a game of Commander, most people are going to be playing a multicolored deck. This thing's very cool. I feel like you can run this even outside of Eldrazi, as long as you can reliably make a colorless mana pip. If you guys have only basics, you can't make this mana. You need to have like a waste, or you need a rock that taps for colorless, or you need a land that taps for colorless. You can't cast this thing with your basics. That's something notable. When I first started playing Magic the Gathering, I had a judge called on me, and I still remember that embarrassment and shame to this day. Because I tried to cast a colorless spell with a colorless mana pip with a mountain. I was a criminal. I was cheating, and I didn't even know it. Officer Squarehead says, how do you feel about All Sun's Dawn? Yeah, let's pull up an All Sun's Dawn. I'm not familiar with All Sun's Dawn. Is it old? It's not that old. Okay, it's 60 cents. It's 5 mana. It's a green sorcery. And it says for each color, return up to 1 target card of that color from your graveyard to your hand. Then remove All Sun's Dawn from the game. 10 out of 10. Okay, cool. So we saw a card called, like, Academy Reclamation or Campus Reclamation. It was a Boros card. It was 5 mana, and it was a sorcery, and it cared about artifacts and enchantments specifically. It returned an artifact and enchantment from your graveyard to exile, and then it also exiled the top 2 cards of your library, and you could play them until end of turn. I would much rather play this thing. This thing is a lot better. It's green, it's 60 cents, and it can get a bunch of different things. And if you're in a multicolored deck, this thing's really cool. Something else notable about the way that this thing is worded, though, and it makes it a little less of a non-bow in our Ululek deck, for each color among... So, for each color, return up to one target card of that color from your graveyard. I'm pretty... Please correct me if I'm wrong, chat. But Devoid, the thing that makes our creatures colorless, the Eldrazi keyword, Devoid, I think Devoid turns this card off. I'm pretty sure Devoid turned this off, and our other creatures are colorless, and as we talked about earlier, it cares about color, so I don't know. I feel like I'd rather run this in like a Ramos the Dragon Engine deck, maybe like a Ruka Rumel Sliver Eldrazi deck. I don't think it works here. Accurate. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I am not a judge, guys. I am not a judge. I always need help. I humble myself every time I turn on my webcam. And a Sage Slay says an Ugin the Spirit Dragon. And then we're going to do an Eternal Scourge. So Ugin the Spirit Dragon from a Sage Slay. Thank you very much for hanging out with me over on Twitch and helping me build my platform there, Sage Slay. Ugin the Spirit Dragon is an 8-mana colorless planeswalker, and it's crazy because it's got 3 abilities. It enters with 7 loyalty, and the +1, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. That's just Lightning Bolt on a +2. And its -X is what this thing is known for. If someone's resolving an Ugin the Spirit Dragon, they're gonna wipe the board, and they're probably in a colorless Eldrazi deck. This thing says that you exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that have 1 or more colors. This is the mode you gotta expect when you see this thing hits the battlefield. This is the little board wipe. It's great. It gets rid of problems. It is 8 mana. It is a powerful effect. Almost every time I see Ugin cast, it's for the -X, and it's usually to make me sad. Alright, so you say an Eternal Scourge. Eternal Scourge. Eternal Scourge is... Okay, this is an Eldrazi horror. It's a 3-mana thing. And this thing came out in the Eldritch Moon expansion. And you may cast Eldrazi Scourge from exile. It's a 3/3 Eldrazi for 3 mana. And when this thing becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, exile Eternal Scourge. Okay, cool. So it's kind of like Norin the Wary. It exiles itself, but we can keep casting it again and again. Okay, so the thing that prevents us from really comboing off with this thing right here is it has to be an opponent. An opponent has to be interacting with it. If we could interact with it ourselves, we could probably go infinite with this thing. If we want to be that kind of person. It's cool. I like it a lot. If it dies to a board wipe, though, it doesn't do the thing. Someone has to target it, and they can see that it gets the ability to be recast. And I really doubt that our opponents are going to do that to this thing, because our commander Ululek has that trigger when we cast things. And if they exile it, that means we can cast it again. And I don't think our opponents are going to give us that Ululek trigger. But they might, and if they do, that could be super silly. I think that's the first Eldritch Moon card we've seen tonight. Curator Beastie, because the Eldrazi have Devoid. Curator Beastie. I'm unfamiliar with the Curator Beastie. Curator Beastie came out in Duskmourn. It's a 6-mana mono-green beast creature. It's a 6/6 with reach. Colorless creatures you control enter with 2 additional counters. Whenever it enters or attacks, Manifest Dread. That means that you look at the top 2 cards of your library, you put 1 into your graveyard, and you exile 1 face down, and if it's a creature, you can cast it. It's cool. This thing gives you colorless creatures. We care about colorless creatures because we're running Eldrazi. I like it a lot. It's only 50 cents. It came out in the Golgari Precon from Duskmourn. Cool suggestion. A-Bomb over on TikTok says the colorless part is the only part that matters. Honestly, A-Bomb, true. Just making our board big. And if we're copying our spells with our commander's trigger, And then all the Eldrazi that enter are getting the counters off the Beastie. That's going to be impactful. It's going to be great. Make our guys big as hell. Ugin's Binding says an old Starchy says an Ugin's Binding. Ugin's Binding. Ugin's. Alright guys, while we wait for that to load, I am Bigger Gamer Magic. I use green screen effects to make silly little Magic the Gathering edits here on TikTok and all over the internet. And on lives, we do live deck building. If you want to suggest a card, put it in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Max Field deck list, and you can see that deck list on the link tree in the profile. If you want to vote on what commanders we talk about during live deck building, y'all can check out the Discord that's also in the link tree. This is an Ugin's Binding. It's a blue instant for 3 mana. It's a $2.50, and it came out in Modern Horizons 3. And it says Devoid. This spell is colorless, even though it is blue. And you return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. And whenever you cast a colorless spell with mana value 7 or greater, you may cast Ugin's Binding from your graveyard. When you do, return each non-land permanent you don't control to your owner's hand. This thing is like setting up a Cyclonic Rift trap card in your graveyard. This thing is absolutely nuts. Thank God it only really synergizes hard in an Eldrazi spell, because it's probably the only place you're going to see that trigger of getting a colorless spell of 7 or greater. This thing is nuts, though. It is a must include in an Eldrazi deck. It interacts so hard. It is so good, y'all. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Come on, boy. My dog wants to come in. Alright. Did he fuck up the green screen? I hope not. Let's check. Rad. Okay. My whole studio is hanging on with, like, clips, like laundry clips to hang up the screen. Alright. Bam. Uh-oh. Okay. There we go. Alright. Sorry for the connection issue, guys. I'm not sure what's wrong. Alright. I want to buy one of those deck, but I don't know if it's good for Ulalek. Rhystic Study is very... Oh, yeah. Rhystic Study simply just is the commander card. Rhystic Study is amazing. Rhystic Study says that whenever an opponent casts a spell, they may pay an additional 1 mana. If they don't pay that 1 mana, we draw a card. Because Commander is a multiple opponent format, there are a total of 4 people at that table. You have 3 opponents. This thing is going to trigger usually at least once during their turn if they're casting conventional spells. That is why this card is like $60 every time it's printed. It simply is the best piece of card draw in Commander, period, full stop. That's why it's $60. It's just so amazing in Commander, y'all. It is so good. It's a card synonymous with the format. It that betrays. It's Jeremy. It's Jeremy says an it that betrays. It that betrays is a mean, mean card. This is a 10 mana colorless Eldrazi spell, 11/11. And if we pay 2 mana with our Ulalek trigger, we can get 2 of them. And this thing has Annihilator too. And this is actually the first time we've seen the Annihilator keyword on this entire live. Chat, I respect you so much tonight, chat. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for not being sweaty. Let's explain what Annihilator does. So Annihilator is an attack trigger that the defending player has to sacrifice a permanent before they even declare blockers. Annihilator is like the roughest keyword. It is hardcore. It makes me question why I play it with someone sometimes. Sometimes they double up their Annihilator trigger. And multiple instances of Annihilator 2 is just Annihilator 4. It's crazy. You can see sometimes upwards of like Annihilator 6. And it makes you sacrifice it. So it gets around indestructible. It's crazy. And when your opponents sacrifice things to the Annihilator trigger, and any other thing they're sacrificing, you just get it. You just get it. And when they run out of creatures and artifacts and enchantments, they have to sacrifice their lands, and you get those too. This is a cheeky it's a frustrating card. If the deck is built to support, like, forcing your opponents to sacrifice stuff, this simply is one of the best cards in the deck. That's probably why it's $20. It's a great card, y'all. It's really good. But gosh, is it frustrating to play against. Especially if you double them up with Ulalek. Please take a look into a good counter. A good counter. Okay, let's talk about the best counter. So we're in all 5 colors, and on live deck building, we talk about whatever card we want to. So we're going to talk about Mana Drain. Mana Drain is the best blue counter spell, and that's why it's like 50 bucks. Yeah, it's 50 bucks. It's 2 mana. It's 2 blue mana, and this thing can get you so much mana. This is, in fact, a ramp spell that runs off your opponent's tiers. Because this thing says counter target spell. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you just get that much colorless mana. So it incentivizes you to hurt your friends the most. Like, if you see that they tap for 5, I probably cast this. Sometimes, if you cast this thing and you hit someone's 6-drop, it's like you doubled your mana for the turn. This thing is absolutely coconuts. It is 50 bucks. And I gotta warn you, like, it will make you win games. The mana that this thing can produce off resolving it and just ruining someone's day is enough to swing a game, especially if it's like 5 or 6. It's absolutely coconuts. It's a whole fruit salad. Spell Shrivel. Spell Shrivel. What the hell is a Spell Shrivel? Spell Shrivel. Spell Shrivel probably doesn't have 2 E's. Spell Shrivel. Okay, okay, this thing's a vibe. It's got an Eldrazi on it. It's a 3 mana mono blue devoid, meaning that it's colorless, and counter target spell unless its controller pays 4. That's a chunky tax. I bet a lot of people won't be able to pay for it. And if that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. This is just mean. This is just a mean counter spell. Okay, so it's a common. I don't want to say it's like the best. It's definitely not the best counter spell. It's a decent counter spell. It itself is colorless, which is cool. We care about colorless triggers. We care about colorless spells. I don't think this commander cares about Devoid. No, but a lot of stuff we put into the deck, Skull. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. A lot of stuff we've seen on the deck list does care about colorless stuff. Echoes of Eternity, go infinite. So yeah, Echoes of Eternity is something that got printed in the same set as Ululek. Echoes of Eternity is like the Eldrazi Harmonicon. A Harmonicon is things that make things trigger additional times. This thing is 6 mana, it's $3, and it says a permanent if a triggered ability of a colorless spell if a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you may copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. 10 out of 10. It just says that we do all our triggers twice, and we copy things harder. Void! Thank you for popping in, Void. You say a not of this world. Not of this world. What is it? Not of this world. Not Void. I put Void instead of not of this world. Put Void of this world. Not of this world. Not of this world is 7 mana. It's a Eldrazi instant. That's impactful because our commander cares about Eldrazi spells. Eldrazi spells don't have to be creatures. This one's an instant, and it's still an Eldrazi spell, meaning that we can still double it up with our commander. Let's give him a little chin scratch. He's our good boy. Alright, this thing says counter target spell or ability that targets a permanent you control. Not of this world. Costs 7 less to cast if it targets a spell or ability that targets a creature you control with power 7 or greater. This thing's cool. I really like the art. It's a vibe. It only works in an Eldrazi deck, and that's probably why it's only $2. God, though, the art goes so hard on this thing. I do like the Eldrazi art style. Alright. Envy. Skull M says Envy. Envy? I'm not familiar with the card Envy. Envy, unfortunately, is not coming up. Can I please get a spell check on Envy? Pathraiser of Ulamog. Pathraiser of Ulamog. Pathraiser of Ulamog is an 11 mana 9/9 with Annihilator 3. We're getting real stinky with some more Annihilator triggers. And it has Pathraiser of Ulamog. Can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. It has Turbo Menace. It has like Menace plus an additional creature. It has Hardcore Menace. And that Hardcore Menace is impactful because this thing forces your opponents to sacrifice permanents on attack trigger. This thing's great. It's $3. I love that it's a budget little Eldrazi. The Annihilator makes me sad, just because Annihilator always makes me sad. It's great. It's great. Would play. 10 out of 10. Shax Suraimu says an Animar Soul of Elements. Shrax Suraimu says an Animar Soul of Elements. I love Animar Soul of Elements. He's one of the first decks I built that was good. Animar is a great commander for a Creature Storm build. You just get out a bunch of creatures. Animar helps you do that because Animar ramp hard. Animar ramps because this thing has protection from white and from black. It's a 1/1, and whenever you cast yourself a creature spell, you put a counter on Animar, and creature spells you control cost 1 less to cast for each counter on Animar. And because a lot of Eldrazi spells do not have colored pips, Animar, once he gets enough counters on him, can often just slam out Eldrazi for free. Animar was an Eldrazi commander for a while because most of the Eldrazi were colorless. Animar could get big and pop them out for free. Animar is still a great commander because he has built-in interaction in protection from Orzhov colors. He really didn't need that protection from Orzhov colors. That's like protection from 40% of Magic cards built into the commander. That's great. That's 10 out of 10. I like him. He's hardcore, though, especially if you built him for Eldrazi support. Ol Starchy over on Twitch says a World at War. World at War! World at War is a red sorcery. It's 5 mana, and it came out in one of the original Zendikar blocks. And this thing's $9. And after the first combat main phase of this turn, there is an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. At the beginning of that combat, you untap all your creatures that attack this turn. This thing has Rebound. Rebound is an ability played on instants and sorceries. That means that when the spell resolves, you exile it, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you get to cast a version for free. So this thing gives you an additional combat on the turn you cast it, and then on your following turn, you resolve the Rebound trigger and you get an additional combat. All of that for the low cost of 5 mana in red. That's probably why this card's $9. So often in Commander, if you're doing conventional combat damage, getting extra combat steps means that the game is going to be over twice as fast. It makes games really fast. A lot of players don't like that, especially casual players. I personally kind of like extra combat steps because usually extra combat steps, like, they force you to play a certain way and you are in an aggro strategy anyway. This thing's great though. It is a house. It's 9 mana. Excuse me, it's $9 and it's in mono red, so you can throw it in any little attacky deck you want to. It is also 2 additional combat phases over the course of 2 turns for 5 mana. I like it. It's great, actually. Good to see you, the Lumber Wolf. Thank you for popping in. Liberator, Urza's Battle Thopter. This thing is a meme. It is a meme commander, except this meme will absolutely fly in on over you for commander damage. And the Battle Thop can get kind of big. This legendary Thopter for 3 mana in colorless colors is a 1/2. It's $7. It has flash and flying, and you may cast colorless spells and artifacts as though they had flash. Flash means that you can cast permanents at instant speed. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than this thing's power, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. This thing is like a flashy artifact commander. It's a great artifact colorless commander. He's great. He is a bit of a meme though, because Thopters are have always been the little flying colorless creatures in Magic the Gathering. Sometimes they're blue and sometimes they're red, but mostly they're colorless. And now you can have a Thopter commander. Thank you, Brothers War. Jim Wynn, thank you so much for sharing the live. I appreciate it. I'm Bigger Gayer Magic. I use green screen effects to make silly little Magic the Gathering content all over the internet. And on lives, we do community deck building. And tonight, we're doing Eldrazi Tribal. Our commander tonight is Ululek, so when we cast our Eldrazi spells, we can put 2 mana into them to double them up. If you want to see any of the cards we talked about over here tonight, head on over to the Moxfield page. That is in the link tree. Let's talk about Slip Through Space. I love Slip Through Space. This thing's super fun. It's a 1-mana blue spell, and it says that you draw a card, but also target creature can't be blocked this turn. I love it. It's not an Eldrazi sorcery. This thing's very cool. It's great. It's draw a card for 1 mana, and also target creature can't be blocked. Our commander is Ululek, super relevant. He's a 5-something. He's a 2/5. His body's not super relevant. Or her body. I don't know what's up with Ululek. I'm not going to assume their gender. But this thing's cool. It lets you draw a card, and it makes something unblockable. And when you're running a bunch of noodle monsters, they're going to have relevant powers. This thing can make those things unblockable. Also, the art is a vibe. Shaq Suraimu says a Mystic Forge. Mystic Forge is also a good suggestion. So the Mystic Forge, it's like a 4-mana colorless artifacts. It lets us look at the top card of our library, and we can play artifact spells and colorless spells from the top of our library. Thank you so much for the follow, Alexander. Cool, spacey name. Thank you. I appreciate it. A little MTG content. Thanks for hanging out with me. This is a Mystic Forge. It's a $1.50. It's a 4-mana artifact. And this thing lets us play artifact and color things off the top of our library. And something else notable about this, if we don't like what's on the top of our library, or maybe we're hitting a land and we just want to keep spelling out, we can tap it, pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library. It's very cool. I like it a lot. It's like, it's almost a must include in artifact decks. Mystic Forge is a card synonymous with artifact strategies. Often, if you make your artifacts cheap enough, you can often storm off with a Mystic Forge because it lets you cast off the top. Alexander says a Bearer of Silence. Bearer of Silence. A Bearer of Silence. What the hell is a Bearer of Silence? Alright, so we got a 2-mana Eldrazi. This looks like it's from Zendikar. Looks like it's from the second Zendikar block. It's 50 cents. And when you cast this thing, you can kick it for 2, and if you do, target opponent sacrifices a creature. And this thing can't block, but it flies, which is interesting. Okay, so this thing's cool. It's a little bit of interaction. We do see a lot of Voltron strategies in Commander game. Voltron strategies are strategies that where a player plays their commander is like their special guy, they slam a bunch of auras and equipment on it to make it big and spooky, and then they swing out. That's known as Voltron, known for the anime where they assemble the lions into a giant robot. Because when you slam stuff on your commander, you're assembling Voltron. This thing could be very cool to force them to sacrifice their only special line. Voltron is a very prominent strategy in Commander, and oftentimes in Voltron strategies, they'll give their thing like hexproof, indestructible, and other words that make it really hard to get rid of. And forcing a player to sacrifice something is often the only effective way to make them get rid of the creature. So this is, I feel like this is cool. This is definitely worth running to me in an Eldrazi deck. Especially if we can copy it with the Ululek trigger. Stephen Park says an Eye of Ugin is the best land. Eye of Ugin. Eye of Ugin. Eye of Ugin. Eye of Ugin is 85 American dollars. It's a legendary colorless land, and it says that colorless Eldrazi spells cost 2 less to cast. Static ability, that's why this thing is 85 bucks. It makes Eldrazi's 2 less to cast off the rip. And you can have that effect over the course of multiple spells because it just makes the spells less. You can also pay 7 and tap it, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, slam it in your hand, shuffle. Very cool. This thing is definitely proxy worthy. Definitely run a proxy and playtest this thing before you invest 85 American dollars into this colorless land. It is very cool. And it does pop off Eldrazi decks super duper hard. Oh, BCM Raider, good to see you. You say a Leyline of Mutation. Leyline of Mutation. A Leyline of Mutation. It sounds like a Duskmourn card. Okay, it's mono green, it's 4 mana, and it says that if it's in your opening hand, you play it for free at the beginning of the game, and you may pay Wooburg rather than pay the mana cost for spells you control. So this is very cool. So this is an effect typically put on Fist of Suns, where it lets you play Wooburg instead of other costs. This thing is significant because in Eldrazi decks, you're running like cards that cost a dozen mana, sometimes more. A lot of them cost over 10, and a lot of them are like the really impactful ones that people think of when people run Eldrazi. They hang out around 8 mana and above. And this thing can let us pay Wooburg and like cheat him out at half the cost if we're paying Wooburg. Very cool suggestion. Thank you, BCM Raider. Ooh, A-Bomb over on TikTok says a Sire of Stagnation. Sire of Stagnation is a cool card. We saw this thing. I want you guys to... Alright, okay. I'm gonna buy this card. I thought about it. So there's another card at 6 mana that lets you draw multiple triggers of 2 cards at a time. And that's card called Consecrated Sphinx. I'm gonna talk about Consecrated Sphinx in the same way that we did before. So Consecrated Sphinx is a 6 mana blue card, and it says that whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. This thing is it's like Ristic Study for 6 mana on steroids, because you're drawing 2 cards off the draw trigger. I think that the Sire of Stagnation is Consecrated Sphinx. Like, Sire of Stagnation is rad. It's more restrictive because you're in Dimir colors, but this thing lets you exile the top 2 cards of your opponent's library on their land triggers, and when they do that, you draw 2 cards. If your opponents hit multiple landfall triggers, you're going to be drawing multiple instances of 2 cards, and I find that really exciting. I really like this thing. Something else about Consecrated Sphinx that makes it well known, it's an expensive card. This thing is $150. Obviously, it can't go to them as many places because it's in Dimir colors, but I really like this thing. This thing's a house. I recommend it. I'm probably gonna buy it for $1.29. I'm glad. Oh, it's starchy. I like. Okay, so Azlask. So if we talk about Azlask, Azlask is Ululek's brother. Azlask, I'm pretty sure, is the other 5 mana Eldrazi commander, the alternate commander for this precon. I'm pretty sure you already got it if you got Azlask, if you bought the precon. If you bought the precon. Oh my god. Hey, Equinox Paradox. I'm happy to see you, Equinox Paradox. Equinox Paradox, I'm not happy to see you suggest a Void Winnower. Void Winnower is one of my least favorite cards in this entire game. It's a 9 mana, $33, 11/9, and it says that your opponents can't cast even mana spells. Something about the way that this is worded. Just your opponents. You're fine. You can cast whatever you want. Just your opponents are sad. And when it says even mana spells, also they can't block. Your even mana CMC creatures can't block. This is like, you can't plan for this. And what if your removal is even mana? You can't get rid of it if your removal's even mana. God, I hate this card. I hate this card so much. I have lost so many games, and I have had so many games clogged up by this thing, and it stops you from playing. The thing I mainly hate about Void Winnower is it stops you from playing. The thing that you spent money and time prepping your deck for to go do, Void Winnower say no, and that's why I don't like Void Winnower. My friends hate when I play Void Winnower, says Shax Suraimu. I wonder why. Ugin the Spirit Dragon. So Ugin the Spirit Dragon is a card you're always going to see in a colorless Eldrazi deck. This thing is $25 for this version. He did get reprinted. There's a fancy art that's cheaper than this. But this thing's rad. It's an 8 mana colorless Planeswalker spell. He himself is like a Cobra Spirit Dragon. This thing enters with 7 loyalty. And the main ability that you're going to see happen when Ulamog... I'm sorry, not when Ulamog hits the field. When Ugin hits the field is the -X ability. The -X ability says that exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that's 1 or more colors. So the way that Devoid works, this little keyword over on our boy here, says that it's colorless. This is going to be a one-sided board wipe, and often it's going to be all of its loyalty. Usually they'll put -7 into this if you have a bunch of high drop spells or high drop permanents. This thing's coconuts. It's a whole fruit salad. It's also very fun to have on the battlefield, because if you don't -7 it, like let's say you only -6 it, and no one slams out some hasty creatures, This thing is just a removal stick now. So if anyone plays anything with 3 toughness or less, you can hit it with the Ugin laser beam and deal 3 damage to it. Ugin is so much removal, and if they don't have to use it to get rid of your board with the -X on the turn it enters, they're gonna be bolting you. Can they bolt you? Yeah, they can bolt you too. If you got a low life total, Ugin can straight up just get you with the 3 damage activated abilities. He's crazy, y'all. He's a good time. This version's 24. I think he got printed again in not Commander 2019, and just Core Set 2019. So there definitely are cheaper versions of Ugin out there if you want to look. He's also got some different art treatments. I am gay and love MTG, so I watch your content. Rising Wind, I am so happy to hear that. Rising Wind, you are exactly my target audience, and I am so glad that the algorithm hath deigned to bring us together. I am so glad to have you here, my friend. Hey everybody, I'm BGM. I make silly little MTG content all over the internet using green screens and other graphics. And on lives, we do live deck building, where we pick a commander. This one was picked by my Discord, and the theme of the poll was deck types I hate. We voted amongst Eldrazi, Slivers, and Shrines, and they chose to curse me with Eldrazi. Here's the reality trip. This is our viewer suggestion. If you want to suggest a card, put it in the comments. If we talk about it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. This thing is 2 mana, and it is a legendary artifact creature, equipment, jellyfish, 0/4, and you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and as long as the reality chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top. You also equip it for 3. This thing's cool. Let's talk about value. Let's talk about mana investment. This thing is a mana investment of 5. The mana investment, you got to pay 2 to tap it. You got to pay 2 to cast it, and you got to pay 3 to equip it before you get any of this good stuff. Well, actually, I guess you can look at the top card, but you can't do anything with the top card until this thing is on somebody's wrist. This thing is very cool. It was printed in Neon Dynasty. It's $6. It's a good time. There is a Izzet Merfolk equipment commander that goes absolutely ham with the reality chip, and I forget their name. Fathom Feeder, suggested by Alexander over on TikTok. Fathom Feeder. Fathom Feeder. 10 out of 10 art, y'all. Fathom Feeder is a 50-cent, 2-mana Dimir Eldrazi drone 1/1. It's colorless, it's got Death Touch, and it also has Ingest. Ingest means that whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of their library. You can also activate this thing for 5 mana in Dimir colors. You draw a card, each opponent exiles the top card of his or her library. Okay, cool. So we got 5 mana, we can draw a card. Thank you so much, Shaq Saramu. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. Thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. You've given me some good suggestions tonight. This thing's cool. It's a low CMC Eldrazi. So if we kind of want to do low CMC Eldrazi's, we can copy them up with our commander. We can get multiples of this thing. And it has a really relevant keyword, meaning Death Touch. Often in a 4-player game of Commander, the keyword Death Touch is just enough to stop your opponents from wanting to attack you. Having 1 Death Toucher is really valuable. It makes you look like a lot harder of a target than a soft target. Can we talk about Mother of Machines for this? Yeah, absolutely. We get to talk about Mother of Machines. Yeah, guys, we'll talk about whatever card you want. We're in a 5-color Eldrazi build, so we're unrestricted by cards we can put in here. As long as they're not banned in Commander, they will pull up in our Moxfield search. Mother of Machines. Mother of Machines. All right, spoken. Goddamn. My one complaint about the Moxfield website is that their Praetor arts are always going to come up in Phyrexian. But lucky for you guys, I can read this for you. This says, Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. It's 5 mana, it's a white creature, and it says that if a triggered ability of a permanent you control would trigger, it triggers an additional time. If it's entering the battle, it doubles your enter the battlefield effects, and it takes away your enter the battlefield effects for your opponents. So this thing's really punishing, right? So it can stop a lot of things from functioning altogether if they work off of ETB triggers, and that can be really frustrating. This is a stacks piece. This is a $30 mono white stacks piece, and it makes me sad. But the community loves her because she's hot. Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, spoken mommy by the heathens of the community. That's Mother. You all got to see Mother. Sometimes I make silly little Magic the Gathering edits where I make silly jokes that Elish Norn is calling me on the phone. Yeah, if you'd like to see those are on the profile as well. Kona Rescue Beastie is a 4-mana mono green creature. This thing came out in the Duskmourn expansion in Halloween of 2024. This is a 4/3, and it's got Survival, which is a trigger that triggers at the beginning of the second main phase. And if this boy's tapped, we get to slam a creature from our hand onto the battlefield for free. And this is a relevant effect in an Eldrazi deck, because Eldrazi decks run a ton of large creatures that tossed a ton of mana, and Kona is a way that we can slam them onto the battlefield for free a lot faster than paying 13 mana as God intended. I run Reality Chip in Orvar. It's insane. What the hell is Orvar? Orvar! Oh, Orvar, the mono blue changeling thing. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, you create a token that's a copy of that permanent. And when a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, you create a token that's a copy of target permanent. This thing's very fun. I've seen this thing go crazy. As the commander, it can take very long turns, in my experience. Battery Bearer, suggested by Equinox Paradox over on Twitch. Thank you so much for hanging out with me over on Twitch, Equinox Paradox. If you guys would like to help me earn a little bit of coin for my content, please head on over to Twitch, hit the follow button, head on back over to TikTok. I know we're not super looking forward to leaving TikTok for any amount of time, considering it might get banned again. So let's talk about this Battery Bearer. It's a 4-mana Simic spell, and it looks like it was printed in the March of the Machines expansion. It's a 3/4, it's 40 cents. It's an uncommon that says that creatures you control can tap for colorless, and it can only be spent, and can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. Whenever you cast an artifact spell with mana value 6 or greater, you draw yourself a card. This thing could be very cool. I imagine it could be really cool with a Mycosynth Lattice. Mycosynth Lattice is a 6-mana card, and it's only used to commit crimes. Mycosynth Lattice is a miserable card. It's a 6-mana artifact, and it says that everything's an artifact. All permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types. And when someone plays Mycosynth Lattice, they're about to commit a crime, because Mycosynth Lattice makes lands artifacts. So when you see Mycosynth Lattice hit the battlefield, they're either about to gain control of everything, including your lands, or they're about to blow up everything, including your lands. This is just bad news. If you see this on the battlefield, assume the worst, and you should panic, and you should get rid of it. In my opinion. Lurking Predators. Lurking Predators. Lurking Predators is fun. It's a green card. It's 6 mana. It's an enchantment. It's $12. And it says that whenever an opponent casts a spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card onto the bottom of your library. It's a cool card. It's very fun in a creature build. You definitely want to have a lot of creatures in this thing. I'm not sure if I would run it in our version of Ululek, because we've seen every version of an Eldrazi enchantment, an Eldrazi sorcery, and an Eldrazi instant. So I feel like this thing could whiff a lot in Ululek in particular. But on live deck building, I talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. If you love this card, it's definitely a good card. This thing is $12. That's not normal for any green 6-mana enchantment to be $12. Also, it slams creatures from the top of your library on your opponent's turns, right? Whenever an opponent casts a spell, yes, 10 out of 10. This thing, if we can scry, if we have this in a scrying deck, like maybe the Simic Elf deck from Lord of the Rings that cared about scrying, this thing would be absolutely coconuts in a deck that cares about scrying, or surveilling, or just manipulating the top of the library because it can cheat out tons of creatures. This thing's great, actually. I just don't think it's great for Ululek. Mind Sculpt You, very cool username, Mind Sculpt You. You say copy the stack. Yeah, so Ululek's trigger is crazy. Y'all, Ululek's trigger says that you pay 2 mana and then you copy the stack. Ululek, I'm gonna move out the way so y'all can read Ululek a little better. Ululek is popping off, y'all. Wonderful if you want to put the Fear of God in your 10 out of 10, yes. So Alexander says a chittering dispatcher. Chittering dispatcher. Hey everybody, I'm BGM, and on live deck building, we talk about Commander. Our Commander tonight is Ululek. If you want to suggest a card, put it in the comments. I also use green screen effects and other graphics to make Magic the Gathering content on TikTok. I appreciate the likes and follows. If you would like to help me make a little bit of money off my content, head on over to Twitch, hit follow, and then head on back over to TikTok. I know we don't want to lose TikTok after the weekend. This is a 3 mana, 70-cent mono green creature. It says Eldrazi Drone, Devoid, and Myriad. Myriad is a trigger that when this thing attacks, it makes a tapped and attacking version of itself for each of our opponents. It could be attacking. And when this thing leaves the battlefield, you create a 0/3 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token that you can sacrifice for mana. This thing's very cool. It's a leave the battlefield trigger, mind you, so if we want to blink it, if we want to hit that ETB, well, this thing doesn't have an ETB, but if we want to blink it in response to like some removal or someone's trying to target it, we can do that, and this thing will make the spawn then too. Also, when our Myriad copies leave, they're all going to generate spawn. That is an insane amount of value on a 3-mana creature. That's crazy. So on turn 4, when we get this thing to attack, it's going to make 3 copies if we're in a 4-player game of Commander, as God intends. And then we're going to have those Myriad tokens die, and then they're going to make little scions that we can sacrifice for mana. This is a very cool card. I like this a lot. It was printed in the Modern Horizons 3 expansion, which is the same set that our Commander for tonight, Ululek, comes from. In fact, they are from the same precon. Shax Saraimu says, Zuladok. Zuladok is the colorless Eldrazi Commander. It came out in Commander Masters. It's $4. It's a 6-drop. 5 generic and 1 colorless pip. This legendary Eldrazi says, colorless spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have Cascade. Cascade is a trigger that means when you cast a spell, if it has Cascade, you exile cards off the top of your library until you exile a spell with lesser mana value of the spell you originally cast, and then you get to cast that thing for free. But if you don't want to cast it, you can choose to exile that spell. It's a worse version of Discover. Discover's a lot like that, except if you don't want to cast it, you can put it in your hand instead of exiling it forever. This thing's crazy. So this thing is the Eldrazi Commander if you want to run just the big ones. You want to run like, I don't know, Ulamog, Kozilek, Emrakul, all the versions, you put them in here, and that's your deck, and you just run a crap ton of rocks and effects like removal. And that's your deck. And it's just the Eldrazi big boy deck. And it's very cool. My friend played a hardcore version of this with, like, proxies of all the expensive rocks. And it was a house. And this was the time before Mana Crypt and, like, a Jeweled Lotus were banned. It was hardcore. It's a cool deck. The art's really good. I like the textured foil treatment they did. It's a good one. It was the Eldrazi Commander when it came out. Void says a Doors of Durin. Doors of Durin are rad. It's a Gruul legendary artifact for 5 mana, and it's 60 cents, and whenever you attack, scry 2. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature, you get to put it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Until your next turn, it gains trample if you control a dwarf, and hexproof if you control an elf. I like Doors of Durin. I run Doors of Durin. In the deck I run Doors of Durin in, I don't care about the dwarf or the elf thing. It's kind of cool. It can give it trample and hexproof, but it don't have to. I feel like that last line isn't super impactful in Commander. There are definitely some very cool utility dwarfs and elves there, especially elves, but I don't know. It's cool. The main spice of the Doors of Durin is slamming out free creatures, and it gives you that scry so you can do a little bit of top deck manipulation. I like it. It's a good card. Skeletal Arisen says put it in Kozilek's Channeler. Kozilek's Channeler. What the hell is a Kozilek's Channeler? Oh, this thing. Okay, so this thing's 40 cents. It's 5 mana. It's a colorless 4/4, and it taps for 2 mana. It's an Eldrazi. I like it a lot. This thing's really cool. It is a dork. It's kind of a little bit of a pricey dork at 5 mana, but it's real cool. It's also 40 cents. We love a budget card here. I have one of these that lives in a binder, and I wave to it every time I flip past it. We'll give him a little chin scratch for his troubles. Thank you. Okay. What's our next card? Geode Golem. Kyle says a Geode Golem. Geode Golem is rad. Geode Golem, I don't know if I like it, but a lot of people love this Geode Golem. People have a lot of excitement about Geode Golem. I'm not a big fan of Geode Golem. This thing is a 5-mana colorless artifact creature golem with trample, and it's a 5/3. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast your commander from the command zone for free. It's great. If you have a really expensive commander, like if you're running one of the Eldrazi Titans in the command zone, here's your Geode Golem, and you can slam down Ulamog for free. It's very cool for those reasons. I have one, and I don't particularly run it because I think the highest CMC among commanders I have currently built is 6. So I don't feel like it's particularly worth it for me. Oh, the energy tap. It would go nuts in this. Conduit of Ruin. Conduit of Ruin. Conduit of Ruin. The hell is a Conduit of Ruin? Okay, we got an Eldrazi 5/5 for 6 mana. It's named Conduit of Ruin, and when this thing is cast, you may search your library for a colorless creature with converted mana cost 7 or greater. Reveal that card, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of it. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less. This thing's cool. This is a little bit of ramp. It's 2 mana every turn for free for 6 mana. That's a lot of value. We just saw a 5-drop that taps for 2 mana. And this thing does all that without tapping. And it's a chunky boy, because he's a 5/5. Also, at 6 mana, if we have a bunch of ramp, we can get an Ululek trigger, double him up, and then it says that our first creature spell costs 4 colorless less per turn. Thank you very much for the follow. Shankon Art, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate that, guys. I am BGM, Bigger Gayer Magic, and on lives, we do live deck building. Tonight we built Ululek. If you want to see any of the cards we talked about on live, head to the Moxfield page. That is in the link tree. If you want to vote on the commanders we talk about during live deck building, head to the Discord. That is also in the link tree. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. We're going to do a few more because we've been going for almost 2 hours. And then we're going to call it a night. I think we're going to do 2 more. So Void says energy tap. And then Kyle said, it's good your commander gets removed a couple times. Yeah, honestly, yeah, if you were drawing a heavy amount of removal, I could see why you would want to run Geode Golem. I, however, run nice and wholesome commanders, so I don't have to run a Geode Golem. Energy tap is 1 mana, and it says tap target creature you control, add an amount of colorless mana equal to the creature's casting cost to your mana pool. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. This thing's crazy. Also, the art is a vibe. It's taking me back to the 90s. I like this a lot. So often Eldrazi's will be like 8, 9, 10 mana spells. You cast this thing, and you can generate that much mana. Is this an interrupt? No, it's a sorcery. So at sorcery speed, that makes it fair. It's a sorcery. For 1 blue, at sorcery speed, you can make like 10 mana. I like this a lot. I would play the hell out of this in an Eldrazi deck if I had access to blue. This is great, actually. Shankon Art, thank you for the follow. Alright. Oh god, use energy tap on Emrakul, 13 minutes. Yeah, let's pull up Emrakul. I'm so surprised we have not seen Emrakul tonight. We'll pull up an Emrakul. We'll pull up the new Emrakul, actually. And yeah, we'll close the night with Emrakul, the world anew. This is a 12 mana, $13 colorless Eldrazi Titan, and you may cast the spell, gain control of all creatures target player controls, period, full stop. They're yours now. Flying, protection from spells, and from permanents that were cast this turn. Yikes. When Emrakul, the world anew, leaves the battlefield, sacrifice all creatures you control. Fair and balanced. Fair and balanced. That feels fair. I'm glad it has the death trigger on itself. This thing is super impactful. It's 13 bucks. And it takes all your boys. All your boys becomes this players when this thing enters the battle. I hate this thing. It's not even that. It's not even enters the battlefield. It's on cast trigger. This thing is absolutely disgusting. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, that's Emrakul, the world anew. I feel like, all right, let's end the live on something less sweaty. What we're gonna do one more suggestion for the last card of the night. It looks like Shaxx. Wait, those are new Emrakul. I need to check them out. Okay, that's Emrakul. Energy tap. Forsaken Monument. Matten is gonna get our last suggestion with a Forsaken Monument. Forsaken Monument simply is one of the best cards in an Eldrazi tech. Forsaken Monument. It's 5 mana. It's colorless. And it says that colorless creatures you control get +2/+2 as an anthem. And whenever you cast a permanent for... Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, it gets an additional colorless. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain a little bit of life. This thing's amazing. It makes all our colorless Eldrazi +2/+2. Most of our Eldrazi are going to have Devoid. And if they don't have Devoid, they're colorless already. So it's going to give all of them +2/+2. We're going to make a bunch of colorless mana off those triggers. And we're going to gain a bunch of life because most of our spells are going to be colorless. This thing's a house in an Eldrazi deck, and it's only $5. This thing was reprinted in, it looks like, Commander Masters. Alright guys, once again, I am BGM or Bigger Gayer Magic. If you're a big gay nerd and you like talking about Commander with me, please hit like and follow. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. If you want to see any of the cards we talked about tonight, check out the Moxfield deck list. That's in the link tree. If you want to vote on what commanders we talk about during the show, check out the link in for the Discord. Thank you all for hanging out with me, and I hope